Well, it's Valentine's Day and love is in the air. And you know, in terms of horror-related holidays, the old V-Day isn't really a priority. It seems like Halloween and Christmas get all the attention of the Blood and Guts crew. But February 14th actually does have its fair share of films set on or around it. Like, the first one that everyone knows about My Bloody Valentine and its remake, so we're not going to cover those here, and instead we're going to give our attention to 10 more that are a little lesser known. So, these are 10 films that are either set on or feature the holiday, so let's check them out and see if we hate them, or if it's love at first sight. Number 10. Our first entry is a TV movie and part of the Hulu series Into the Dark, and it's an episode entitled Down. The show was an anthology with a feature-length episode out every single month that focused on a specific holiday, and this takes place the day before Valentine's Day, the 13th, and it has this office building and a couple of people working late. One of them is Jennifer here, and she ends up in an elevator with Guy, played by this dude who has been on like 100 TV shows that I've never seen a single episode of. But I guess both of these actors were featured on a show called Kingdom that is not like Kingdom Hospital or the Danish show The Kingdom. The elevator shuts down and they're stuck, and since Monday is President's Day, they're worried about being stuck for the whole weekend. They start to get to know each other, and at first things seem to be okay, and he eventually reveals that even though he said he had never seen her before, he had in fact seen her around the office. But things take a turn when they start talking about sex and get heated and reenact Aerosmith's 7th most popular song of all time. Right afterwards, though, things get very tense and uncomfortable, and Guy's actual intentions are revealed, and the mood changes as their holiday turns a literal red. And like I said, this is part of the Into the Dark series, and it was the 5th episode of the first season, with each episode revolving around the holiday that takes place in the month it airs. A Valentine's Day episode was a given. And it's one of those rare films that takes place in a single location. Like, sure, there's a couple of other ancillary spots in the beginning and such, but the bulk of the runtime is just in the elevator. So it comes down to the performances and the script. And the acting is pretty solid. The script, a little less so, although it's certainly not a difficult watch. The director is Daniel Stamm, who directed The Last Exorcism and also 13 Sins, both of which I thought were fine, and this is kind of the same. The Valentine's Day aspect isn't crucial to the story. It does take place on the holiday, and a gift is a plot device to get some use, but the day itself isn't that important. Number 9. Next up is one from 1997, and with a title like Cupid, it's bound to be Valentine's based. This begins with a romantic interlude that includes Billy Peltzer himself, and he asks Linda to marry him. But she says no, so he tosses her down the steps and kills her. Later, he meets up with Kirsty Cotton and becomes infatuated, much to the chagrin of Princess Karina, who's his sister. Jennifer is staying with her sister and dealing with an obsessive ex, while her sister is dating Buck. Eric starts prying on her, which leads to him killing Susan, and his relationship with his sister is a little, well, let's just say that there's a whole category for it on a certain hub. When her sister obviously doesn't show up at the house, Jennifer tries to find out what happened to her, and Eric helps out while trying to court her. And it's weird because this was a straight-to-video thriller, but it's pretty tame stuff and could easily air as a TV movie. And honestly, it feels like a standard Lifetime movie. Which is what's weird because the director here is Doug Campbell, and his filmography is basically just Lifetime movie after Lifetime movie. And some of his hits include such films as Bad Sister, Stalked by My Doctor, Double Mommy, and Stalked by My Mother. And yeah, those titles all sound crazy, but here's a fun game. Go look up any of those movies I just mentioned on IMDb and look at who the costume designer was. It doesn't dip too far into Valentine's Day territory, although the costume stuff comes into play, as it seems like Eric believes himself to be some sort of physical manifestation of the actual Cupid, and Jennifer as the embodiment of Psyche, the woman that Cupid loved in his myth. Even though the holiday doesn't seem to be a big part of the movie, the promotion certainly was, and the movie was released right beforehand, so it's clear that they were riding the analogy. It's fine, but it really is just sort of a typical Lifetime film, except with Zach Galligan, and he's not really at his best here. Number 8. This one here is a bit more on the nose, since it's called Valentine's Dayz. From 2018, with a Z on the end instead of an S, and it's a capital Z, so I bet this is a zombie film. This has a couple of cops, and one of them looks like he's ready to push on a pair of sunglasses and make a pun at any given second. And while out in the town, he meets Sarah, and she hits on him. So I had to look to see if he was the director, but no, he's not. And then she falls madly in love with him in the span of one night. Are we sure he's not the director or the writer? We also see some snippets of zombie attacks here and there, with some news show discussing how the outbreak started with animals. And I think the news stuff, I think they're trying for comedy. And meanwhile, Max and his partner are thieves and prepping for a heist. And I guess one of the people they're using for it is a ventriloquist for some reason. Max asks Sarah to marry him, and she says yes. And he does it over the phone, just like every girl has dreamed about. Max also recruits a wacky sleaze and a dude wannabe. But then I guess he just kills the guys who hired him, so the job is off. They then say it's Valentine's Day by introducing yet another oh-so-silly character, and it turns into a full-on outbreak. And it turns out that Sarah has fallen victim to the virus. And yeah, there's so little narrative thread in this movie. It's just a collection of random scenes, and the only consistent plot element is the romance of Max and Sarah, which literally was just that they met and fell in love for whatever reason, but now she's dead, so I don't know where they're going to go from here. And the director on this is Mark Allen Michaels, and I'm kind of curious about the story here. He directed his first film, Mind Rage, with Tippi Hedren and Dennis Christopher back in 1996, but it didn't get released until 2001. But then he took a 15-year break from the industry, only returning in 2016, and then a series of other low-budget films such as this one. In fact, the film he made right after this one was called Vampires on a Boat, again with a Z on the end, and again features Max and Sarah falling in love, but they appear to be different characters. And yeah, with Max being such an irresistible lady man and also admired and respected by all of his peers, and he's the most badass of all badasses. He's exactly the kind of character that a writer-director usually reserves for himself, like Neil Breen or Tommy Wiseau. And yeah, sure enough, actor Dallas Valdez actually is Mark Allen Michaels, just using a pseudonym. And sadly, even with the title, even with the outbreak starting on Valentine's Day, it's not really important to the plot. I guess that the title was just there because of the romantic subplot, but that's dropped halfway through. So it's not even really that relevant there. And yeah, I'm starting to wonder if we're going to get some real Valentines in our Valentine's Day horror movies. Number 7. Let's head over to Japan for this next one and go back to 2009 with Vampire Girl vs. Frankenstein Girl, which has a surreal beginning with an eye-patched vampire girl fighting 3 monster schoolgirls, and more blood sprays in the first 5 minutes of this movie than in the previous films here combined. It's Valentine's Day in a high school, and there's Mizushima here who's dating Keiko, and her dad is the vice principal. And the vibe is pretty over the top. There's a cutters club at the school, and there's a new student named Manami, and she doesn't come to school when it's too sunny out and wears a cape all the time. She has a crush on Miz and gives him a chocolate as a Valentine's Day gift, which causes him to trip. And oh yeah, there's also the Super Dark Girl Club, which yeah. Happy Valentine's Day, I guess. Turned out that the chocolate that Mizzy ate was spiked with Manami's vampire blood, and he's now a half vampire. And if he drinks more, then he'll be a full one, which Keiko is very unhappy about. But it turns out that her dad, while being the vice principal, is also a kabuki-style Doc Frankenstein and doing experiments on students in the basement with the help of the sexy school nurse. Like, this movie is just bizarre and insane. But what else would you expect from the director of Tokyo Gore Police and Meatball Machine Reject of Death? This was actually the film he made directly after that one, and it's funny because it was based on a popular manga that had the same title. And you would think that it might be a Twilight sort of thing with that supernatural love triangle storyline. I mean, after all, this came out in 2009, which was the height of Twilight mania, at least in regards to the books. And this seems to tick some of those same boxes. A vampire in high school, doting over a human classmate, with another supernatural breed vying for their love. Even having a kickoff on Valentine's Day seems to indicate a more gushy kind of feel to the film. But then it just has these geysers of blood and gore pouring out at every turn, and you realize that it absolutely is not. The weird thing is that it's only an hour and 20 minutes long, and Frankenstein Girl doesn't even come into play until about an hour in. And she's Keiko, stitched together from the remnants of the clubs in the school. And yeah, again, the holiday of Valentine's Day isn't really a plot point. It kicks things off since what turns Mizushima into a half vampire is a Valentine's Day present, but the story takes place over time, so it moves away from the day very quickly. But yeah, even though it's not very Valentine's, this movie is as fun as can be. I mean, sure, it's silly, but it's so committed to being over the top and taking what could have been a sappy conceit and making a ridiculous torrent of flying body parts that it's worth every minute. Number 6. Let's check out a movie now that I've definitely covered before, and it's from the year 2000, and it's Lover's Lane. It begins 13 years ago on Valentine's Day, and there's a young couple making out in a car. And then, just like that classic urban legend, they're attacked by a man with a hook hand, and he's already killed the couple in the car next to them. It turns out that the woman killed is the wife of Tom here, and she was having an affair. And the deaths are blamed on Ray, a local man with troubles that was under the psychiatric care of Les Nessman. 13 years later, in present day, Tom's daughter is now grown up, and one of her classmates is a young Cindy Campbell. And the doc's daughter Dee Dee is here too. Jack is still counseling Ray, but on Valentine's Day, 13 years after those killings, Ray breaks loose and heads out for revenge. And let's see. Someone goes insane and murders some people on a holiday and is locked up for over a decade, and then on that same holiday breaks out to continue killing while his psychiatrist searches for him. And you know how I said I've covered this one before? Well, it was in a list of Halloween ripoffs, and this is totally a Halloween ripoff, so it belonged there. But there's a lot of Valentine's Day going on there too. The holiday plays into the plot in a pretty big way, and yes, it all takes place on the day, and of course, the killings begin anew. But maybe this isn't as simple of a mystery as it seems. And this is a weird one because it was an independent film and was directed by John Stephen Ward, who's only directed a small number of films, and only one horror one, this one. It was written by two guys, and one was Jeff Miller, and he's probably the biggest name behind the scenes since he had several other horror scripts produced and was the writer for Deep Star 6 and House 4. Unfortunately for this film, it came out in 2000 and was smack dab in a wave of Scream knockoffs and shares a touch of those characteristics. Like, it feels like a throwback slasher, but lacks any of the self-awareness that was almost a requirement by that point, and just felt like one of the movies that Scream was satirizing. Because of this, it got a little lost in the shuffle, and it's easy to see why. It's fine and all, like, it's a competent slasher flick, but it's nothing special, and just comes off as a bit more the same. And by same, I mean Halloween. Number 5. Okay, this number here may feel like a bit of a deja vu because we're talking about 2020's My Valentine. It has this pop star named Treasure, and suddenly here's another singer named Valentine, and she looks and sounds like Treasure, and people are calling her a ripoff, but she's claiming that they're her songs that her ex-manager stole, and that Treasure has taken her songs. It's stated that it's Valentine's Day, and after her show, a mysterious man named Royal shows up, and he's that former manager, and he clears out the place. They have a confrontation, and then the actual treasure shows up as well, and we discover the secrets of everyone's past entanglements, and Royal starts to get a little bit unhinged, and things get violent. And you know when I said that there'd be some deja vu? Well, it's because this is another entry of Hulu's Into the Dark. Whereas Down was the episode featured in its first year, this was the 2nd February, Valentine's Day themed entry. For this one, they hired Maggie Levin, and if you count this as a legitimate feature instead of a TV movie, it's her feature debut. After this, though, she'd go on to do one of the segments for VHS 99, one that would also feature musicians as the main characters. A lot of people had pointed out the similarities in the Valentine treasure storyline to the real-life drama surrounding the musical artist Poppy. It seems this whole setup directly reflects the fact that she and her manager, a guy named Titanic Sinclair, were sued by another artist named Mars Argo. She had previously been with Titanic, and after their split, he started with Poppy, and her look and sound would soon directly match that of Argo, along with allegations of stalking and abuse. It's unknown if this film is actually based on those events, although the similarities seem a little more than coincidental. And much like the previous year's entry, this episode has very little to do with the actual holiday. Sure, it's set on the date, so it fits the theme, and the lead girl is named Valentine, but it could be any day, really, and if it weren't for one character in the beginning of the film saying it's Valentine's Day, you wouldn't even know that from the plot. Number 4. I like deja vu, so I want to have it again. So we're going to talk now about Cupid. But not the Cupid with Zach Galligan, and not even a TV show with Jeremy Piven. No, this is a film from 2020. It begins with the legend of Cupid and his romance with Psyche, but we learn that there's more to the story than everyone knows, and that Venus actually set up Psyche's death, and Cupid turned evil, spurning love. We then meet a jerky dude on a date, and he's apparently cheating, and his daughter has summoned Cupid to get revenge. And he shows up and starts killing people with arrows. And he's also a gangly angel dude with a messed up face. And I guess also kills the person who summons him. We're then taken to a private school, and you know this is a low-budget horror film, and everyone is speaking with a British accent, so I feel like it's only a matter of time before... Yep, I knew it. Sarah T. Cohen is here. So now I'm embraced for sheer mediocrity, but she's not the only recognizable one here, since our lead is played by Georgina Jane, who was in Witches of Amityville Academy, as well as Curse of Humpty Dumpty 2, both of which have been on this channel so far. She's a witch and casting love spells on a teacher, and she mentions that it's Valentine's Day, of course, and when the mean girls decide to play a prank on her by setting her up and then spreading a video, Faye invokes Cupid. And what's interesting here is that some of the characters are doing an American accent and others are using their regular British accent, but only sometimes, so I'm not totally sure where they're trying to say it's set. I guess that they tried having people use American accents because they said that they sell better, but it becomes distracting. Cohen's is spot on, though, because again, she's a pretty solid actress trapped in so-so movies.
Sure. But first I've got to go wash my face because thanks to you, there's spit all over it.
But Cupes starts the violence while the kids are forced to cancel the big Valentine's Day dance and remove all the decorations. And then Nicola Wright shows up as well, because of course she does. And this was directed by Scott Chambers, otherwise known as Scott Jeffrey. And a lot of this whole new wave of low-budget Brit horror can be traced back to him. He's a producer for a very large amount of the titles, 114 of them in the span of 8 years, and has directed 23 of them, including the 2 Bad Nun movies, Conjuring the Genie, which I covered in my Conjuring ripoff video, Exorcist Vengeance from the Exorcist ripoff vid, and The Curse of Humpty Dumpty. After the success of Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey, which he produced, he claims his company is focusing instead on quality over quantity, which is kind of strange because quality is not what Blood and Honey was known for. But I'll say this for this one, at least it feels very Valentine's Day. It's set on the holiday, features a killer deep in the lore, and uses some heart-based killing methods, so it has that going for it. Number 3. Let's go now to something from 2012, and we're looking at Lovesick Love, which has someone that still knows what you did last summer, and someone else that knows a thing or two about Hot Pockets. Norman is seeing Dory here, who's the Banshee chapter girl, and that's a movie I should find a way to talk about. But Norman is taking their relationship less seriously than Dory, and they go away together for a weekend, and she says that she's always heard that if you can make it through all the holidays with someone, then you're meant for each other. She accidentally tells him that she loves him, which he gets freaked out by, and the next morning she goes a bit over the edge. There's a couple of kids there, and she says that she agreed to watch and says that they don't have a dad, but they call her Mom. She says it's now Valentine's Day and they break out candy and presents, but Norman says that it's June and her parents are also there. She's got a pretty solid lineage since her mom is Mrs. Garrett and her dad hates cans. But then things take a turn when he gets so frustrated that he wants to leave, so she clubs him over the head and ties him to the bed. She's then moved on to Easter because she wants to experience all the holidays with him, and the director on this one is Christian Charles, who has a pretty limited filmography. He only directed 7 things, and 3 of them are performance related, like he did a televised concert segment, and then a stand-up comedy documentary with Jerry Seinfeld, and a sketch film with Cheech and Chong. This is his only horror-related work, and with the exception of 1 TV episode, it's his final work in the industry. And this one's funny because it's kind of horror, but also kind of just a thriller, but also feels like a slightly funnier Lifetime movie. The Valentine's aspect is clearly just a small portion of it, since it tries to make it through several holidays, so if you're looking for something full of hearts and flowers, it's not really here. And even if it doesn't feel very horror for the majority, it does get pretty wild at the finish, and it's pretty decent. It's not great, but it's worth a watch. Number 2. It's now time to go to a classic, and we're going to attend 1975's Picnic at Hanging Rock. The opening text tells us that we're set in the year 1900 on Valentine's Day, and that a group of girls vanished without a trace. And as the story commences, we have a private school full of women, and now I know this may come as a shock, but they're headed for a picnic at a place called Hanging Rock. It's said to be a dangerous area with poisonous snakes, so they're warned to be cautious, and young Sarah stays behind under the watchful eye of some of the meaner teachers on hand. She's obsessed with poetry, and also one of her roommates, and has written an ode to Saint Valentine. Then, things get surreal. First, everyone's watches stop at exactly noon, and then a group of girls go on their own into the rocks, where they're compelled to take their shoes off. As they look down on the rest of the group, everyone is asleep, and soon they go under as well, in the shadow of the rock. Yet, old Miss McCraw remains awake. But then, the girls wake up and walk into the rocks, and we soon find out that they're missing, along with McCraw. The town starts to investigate to find out what happened to them, and Edith won't say what she saw up there. A local boy, Michael, becomes obsessed with the mystery of what happens, and his search nearly kills him. And what a fascinating movie this is. It's so simple, and yet so captivating. And it's no surprise that it's by the multiple Oscar-nominated Peter Weir. This is the man who made Gallipoli, The Year of Living Dangerously, Witness, The Mosquito Coast, The Dead Freaking Poet Society, Master and Commander, The Truman Show, but most importantly, The Cars That Ate Paris. This was adapted from a novel of the same name and did quite well with both critics and audiences, and made Australian filmmaking something to notice. It was nominated for a score of awards and even won a BAFTA for cinematography. Back in the 90s, it was even voted as the best Australian film of all time. Eventually, there was a remake of sorts when it was adapted into a TV series back in 2018. It ran 6 episodes and starred Natalie Dormer and Samara Weaving, and got some good reviews, but was not as well regarded as the original. Of course, the main focus of the events kick off on Valentine's Day, and it's certainly relevant to the plot and all, but it's not exactly a crucial element. Also, keep in mind that this isn't a strictly horror film. It's certainly not violent or scary, but it is oddly disturbing and weird, with the mystery of what happened up there being something that will stick with you for a while after. Number 1. Let's wrap this one up with one that I know really keys into the holiday, and it's 2001's Valentine. It starts with this kid named Jeremy, and everyone makes fun of him, and he asks a couple of girls to dance at the big Valentine's Day dance, and they all turn him down. When one girl agrees to make out with him, they're spotted by bullies, so she says that he attacked her, and they beat him up. It then jumps ahead 13 years, which seems to be a key number in this roster. Both this and Lover's Lane jump 13 years. And we meet one of Chucky's targets on a rough date. And she's a medical student who gets a spooky Valentine's Day card and is then stalked and killed by someone in a Cupid mask. We then meet an inhabitant of Planet Terror and Dr. Christmas Jones, and they're having some dating issues themselves. And then Angelus is on hand, so Craig Sheffer lost out on a part. Pretty soon it's clear that someone is targeting the girls and sending them cards with things like chocolates and maggots in them, and the killings then commence as the Cupid mask guy is bumping off the girls, and they figure out right away that it's Jeremy, but then need to determine exactly who he is now. And I guess the implication is that they ruined his life, so he's getting revenge, but really, only one of the women ruined his life, and that's the one that accused him of attacking her, and then the bully guys for beating him up. The other girls literally just said no when he asked them to dance, and yes, they were rude about it, but I think kicking his ass was probably a bit ruder, was it not? So maybe reserve that whole revenge scheme for people that actually deserve it. Like this is some real incel stuff right here. Apparently, the original script addresses this and has the killer take out the boy bullies first, and it's said by the director that he still did so and killed them first, just off screen. Although that still doesn't acknowledge that he's murdering people just for saying no to dancing with him. And this came out in 2001. And you remember how I said that Lover's Lane came out a little late in the whole Scream knockoff cycle? Well, this was a year after that. It was directed by Jamie Blanks, who had some success in this realm with the first urban legend movie, and that was a pretty big hit. But this one was not. Critics overwhelmingly panned it, and it's sitting with an 11% on Rotten Tomatoes, and it didn't perform at the box office, bringing in around $37 million on a $29 million budget. It's not bad, but it's certainly no Scream. On the plus side, it did get nominated for 3 Teen Choice Awards, which, as you know, is a hotly desired indicator of cinematic success. It is, however, very much Valentine's Day oriented. The holiday is all over the movie, with the inciting incident being at a Valentine's Day dance, as is the finale, plus the killer's methods of sending cards and gifts to the victims before attacking. So, even if it's not the best film on this roster, it's certainly the most Valentine-y. So there you have it, 10 movies about Valentine's Day, set on Valentine's. At least they have Valentine's Day in them as a plot point at one point. Very little of them use the wrappings of the holiday in the context of the movie, unlike a lot of the Halloween movies or the Christmas movies, which I feel like use that holiday stuff quite a bit. This just seems to be like, it's Valentine's Day. But yeah, most of these were pretty fun. There was a couple clunkers in here, but for the most part, I enjoyed, or at least didn't mind, the majority of these. There were some really fun ones in here, though, that I really enjoyed. And Picnic at Hanging Rock is a fantastic movie that I recommend you check out. If you've seen some of these, if you haven't seen them, if you know other Valentine's Day movies, if you can think of some Valentine's Day movies besides My Bloody Valentine that are more wrapped up in the holiday, tell me down below in the comments. I'd like to know that. Also hit like if you enjoyed this video, hit the subscribe button if you want to keep getting notified when new videos of this channel come out. Make sure you hit the bell, and go to my Patreon page at patreon.com/movietimelines. I would appreciate that. You can help support this channel, which you can also do just by coming back and watching more videos. There'll be another one coming up very shortly. Thanks a lot, guys, and bye-bye.